Good afternoon there. This is Michael Cross with another weekly edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we like to ask the questions the mainstream media tries to avoid and also explore issues in a depth that, well, mainstream media maybe just can't. And I'm not saying they're not necessarily intelligent enough to do so, but maybe they think that the American public, and for that matter, the Western world, is not intelligent enough. You know, I really do think that most people in the media have the same mindset as the people that are, the 1%, the elite. When they see themselves as some sort of enlightened ones, and the other 99% of the people as being the commoners, or in the old days you used to call the peasants. And they're just as pleased when people are a mass of conformed, compliant people who go to work, pay their taxes, and pretty much do as they're told without too much protest, and will select candidates who are basically 99% the same. Maybe a little difference here and there, but not enough really to matter. It's almost like we live in Plato's Republic, even though he just theorized about how, the perfect society would be. And some people call that a utopia, and some people call it fascism. I mean, you have to choose which you call it when, most of our corporate power and our media is concentrated in an oligopolistic fashion in just the hands of a few corporations. Well, anyway, what I'd like to deal with this evening is the idea of conformity. Now, before I go on, I would encourage people to visit my website at michaelcross.net. And there's an article that I wrote a while back on this very issue of conformity. And again, you can find that at michaelcross.net, or you can just type into Google, "Dare to be Yourself, the Individual versus the Conformist Society." So essentially, what I start the article off with is a quote from, not from Freud, I'll get to Freud in a moment, but from Friedrich Nietzsche. And he states here, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." Now, what did Nietzsche mean by that? That you would feel, that the individual feels like they're overwhelmed by the tribe. Well, essentially, it goes like this. I mean, take a look at our society today. Individuals are extremely compartmentalized. In fact, many of us go to work. We have our little cubicle in an office where we sit in front of a computer along with, maybe a dozen other people, maybe 100, maybe 1,000 other people. And then we have a media that pumps out the same information to everyone everywhere in the country. And if you don't really understand and comprehend how that really turns us into this overwhelmed society that pushes conformity, the only thing you would have to do is study regional talking or speaking patterns in the 1930s as opposed to today. In less than the lifetime of many people, we've gone from local dialects that were almost incomprehensible to people around the country. If you were from Maine, you might not be able to understand someone from rural Louisiana, or even some of the dialects you'd find in the Appalachians or even the Rocky Mountains. But the thing is that over time, because of radio, because of television, because there's a uniformity that is generally set in urban areas where people will speak with the tones of those urban areas. Nowadays, it's most popularly West Coast Hollywood accent, which I actually don't mind because being originally from California and then Oregon, I mean, it's kind of like this, at least that's at least the dominant speech pattern. But the thing is that a lot of the cultural diversity has really been erased. And it's going to become more so as time goes on. Hollywood movies, they go everywhere. I still remember sitting in a little isolated cafe in southern China like 10 years ago. And on the TV, the people working at the cafe were watching SpongeBob. Yeah, I remember hearing an interview years ago. I can't remember who it was. It was saying that they were visiting, when the Soviet Union still existed, they were visiting some remote area like Kazakhstan, and Star Trek was playing on the TV. You see, I don't mind that people enjoy the entertainment that comes out of Hollywood. I mean, if you compare it to a lot of the basic entertainment that comes out of a lot of the European countries, it's far superior. But it still has a way of propagandizing, in a sense, a message, but also a sense of conforming, of being one with what you see. And we can look back, Bernays, how he was able to put, pretty much start product placement, where you would have the leading actor or actress smoking cigarettes in order to make cigarettes more part of the cultural mainstream, especially among women, which before that was not the case. You can look at things like Harper's Bazaar magazine started a campaign back around 1915 that women should shave their underarms. And, before that, most women didn't. And then later, not much later, it was just like, oh, well, let's promote the idea of, women shaving their legs. It wasn't that suddenly some, women just started waking up across the country and started going, hey, I want to spend 10 additional minutes in the bathtub or later the shower and shave my body and, make nicks and cuts and, those sorts of things. Now, you can, maybe men and women both can argue that, well, it looks better or something like that. I don't know. But the thing is, it is something that is conformed. In fact, if you don't believe me, if you're a woman, see the reaction people will have if you just decide to stop shaving for a few months. Especially, nothing else, stop shaving now. And then take that all the way into summer of next year. Most people would not do it. You know why? Because the social stigma would be so great that it would be like, no way. So even women that hate it, they feel it's a hassle, they will still conform. Just like men will wear fashions they may not like, or, maybe they like long hair, but they'll cut it short because they don't want to stand out. I mean, if you think about it, almost all of our tastes are dictated by the society, by advertisers, by the government, by those people that have power, as Bernays stated. And we just accept these things. Why do we eat the breakfast foods we eat? It's not because, we've always done it. No. You go to other countries, you'll find they eat different things for breakfast. But if you try eating a hamburger or pizza for breakfast in front of a bunch of people, they look at you kind of funny. Well, that's because people expect everyone to kind of blend into the tribe. And this is what Nietzsche's talking about. Now, he's talking about the idea that the society is very powerful. Any society you live in is incredibly powerful and will cause you a great deal of anguish and a great deal of anxiety if you actually do something beyond the norm. Going back to Freud. Freud said that essentially guilt is what keeps society together, because you're taught early on this is what you should do by your parents. You don't want to displease your parents. As you get older, you start projecting out those attitudes of this is right and wrong onto new parental symbols, that being your religion or your school or people you see on TV. And you start incorporating those values. Freud called it introjection. And then what will happen is they become you. You cannot see yourself acting outside of that norm, and therefore you conform. You don't have to have written rules that tell you what to do. You don't have to have, going back to the other example, you don't have to have a written rule that says if you're a woman that you will go to university or go to work in a short skirt with hairy legs and eat pizza for breakfast in front of everyone. You don't need a rule that says thou shalt not. You will do it because that has become ingrained in you. Now, Nietzsche goes on a little bit here again, and he says, if you try to go against the norm, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened. Okay. Essentially, it's the pain of doing something that's contrary to society's values. Now, that can extend to politics too. Okay? Every society has its mainstream, proper, I'm not going to say code of ethics, but it's kind of what everyone recognizes as the norm, what you can and can't say and still be considered, a normal person. Now, if you live in Sweden and you come out in the media and talk, you wouldn't see too many articles really extolling the virtues of someone being super religious, because that's considered kind of out of the norm, aside from maybe the rituals. I think actually in many Scandinavian countries, there's more decorations and traditions surrounding, let's say, Christmas than you will find in the United States. They look more religious, but ultimately there will be less religiosity. Okay? Whereas you go to Russia, it would be, you would have a very strong emphasis on patriotism and religion. Those would be part of the norm. In the United States, everyone knows what's politically correct, what is like, oh, I can't believe he said that or she said that kinds of speech. And so, again, this all blends in. But as Nietzsche says, if you do violate it, if you do try to live your life the best way you can, let's say you find you want to live a different way. You want to have more than 2 kids. All right? You want, if you're a woman, to choose to stay at home and raise your kids. Or if you're a man, you choose to stay at home and your wife goes out and works. All those in modern America, whoa, what are they doing? Again, some people do it. There's people that choose to be polygamist. Talk about going outside the norm. But still, now that might be an extreme for most people. But the thing is that when people do that, yeah, you'll be lonely. If you're a woman and you marry into a family where there's already a husband and a wife, just think what's going to happen to your social contacts. You may be disowned by your parents. You may find a situation where the people that used to want to hang around you, they don't want to hang around you. And if they do want to hang around you, they are going to be questioning you. That's going to be the big topic. It's going to be the bull in the china shop, so to speak. It's never going to go away. They're either thinking about asking you something or they're going to ask you something. So again, it can make you lonely. You'll just kind of start gravitating to people who agree with you and live the same lifestyle. The same could be said of people that do a lot of body piercing or tattoos. There's, let's say a person, what do they call it? I know some people that are really into tattoos. They get a bodysuit. What that means in the tattoo world is that they embark on a goal that they're going to tattoo their whole body. Well, more power to you if that's what you want to do. But I guarantee that it will change everything because not too many people do that. Now, there were cultures. I think the culture, I read somewhere where the culture they think gave the inspiration for the Amazons or something, like people in southern Russia, what is now southern Russia or something like that. The women each year a woman would get an additional tattoo. So, you can kind of tell, I guess, if you find the mummies or something, or a body frozen, that you could tell how old the person was when they died because their whole body was tattooed after they reached a certain age. But that was the norm in their society. And, maybe not getting a tattoo in those days. People must have been like, I don't want to do that. It hurts. In those days, I mean, the procedures were quite painful. Then they would be the lonely ones instead. But as Nietzsche points out, there is no price that is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Now, the thing is, I want to extend this a little bit into the idea of questioning. And first of all, why does society want us to conform? Okay, because society wants us to conform. I actually believe it goes way back to when we were living in tribes. You needed social cohesion. You didn't want, as the saying goes, you didn't want a whole bunch of chiefs. Okay? You needed a certain standard by which everyone lived by. Because it was you against the elements and you against the other tribes. So you wanted everyone to kind of be on the same page. Now, again, in those days, maybe there wasn't, what was there not to really conform to? If you're like in some jungle in Brazil, like a traditional tribe of people running around with little or no clothes, gathering food, and protecting yourself from predators, essentially there might be just traditions that you had to live by, or this is what you do when you reach a certain age. It wasn't that whole made for TV movies or something where the boy, when he reaches 14, decides he doesn't want to be a warrior, or he doesn't want to go out and hunt for food. He wants to draw things. Well, in a small community, little difficult to sustain yourself that way. So obviously the elders would be kind of like, no, we need you to go out and do these things instead. So it was a survival thing. And that may be one of the reasons why recent psychological research has shown that the vast majority of people, well over 2/3, are so connected to social cohesion that no matter what the society says, they'll do it. They will just go along with things. Now, I'm not quite as cynical as the playwright George Bernard Shaw was. He has a quote that, 2% of the people think, 3% of the people think they think, and 95% of the people would rather die than think. So he's saying that 95% of the people never really come up with anything on their own. They just kind of go with what society says. Hey, what's on TV tonight? What kind of book is everyone else reading? What kind of music is the most popular right now in the top 10 or 20 chart? And that's what they listen to. Then 3% of the people might be the ones who they maybe, they quote a lot of people. Now I'm not, oh great, here I am quoting people. But the thing is, they may be the ones like you find that would be, I think I'll give a little bit more credit to people than Bernard Shaw does. But, the thing is that they might be into that position where they deal with complex issues, but they never actually go beyond saying, well, so-and-so said this and I agree with them. And it could be outside the norm, though. They may, who knows, if they're still in the hippie culture, they might be quoting Timothy Leary. All right, to sustain themselves. And 2% of the people actually think and maybe come up with radical ideas. I think it's maybe a little bit more than that, but ultimately, people that are on the outside are really a small minority, no matter what the culture is. Now, the thing is, you're thinking, well, maybe this is good that 2/3 of the population will just go along with whatever the dominant paradigm is for the society. But the problem with that is then that the people who are, I'm going to be generous and I'm going to say 10% of the people are trying to think of novel, creative things in order to shake society or just live their own way. But that 10% is going to feel a lot of pressure. Those are the people that when they go to high school, for instance, that's something I point out in my first book, Freedom from Conscience, Melanie's Journey. Those are the people that are the outsiders that are going to feel incredibly isolated. And in modern America, that might mean being bullied. It's not just being ostracized. No one wants to sit next to you during lunch. It also means that you might get beat up or worse when you go to school. And that can be very harmful to young people. And but the thing is, we need people to even work harder at getting people to wake up to things. For instance, it's so frustrating. I see these reports. Last week's show, though, I dealt with a lot of the refugee problems and the migrant problems in regards to the people crossing the Mediterranean. And then I wonder, why haven't the newspapers in America, the major newspapers, really dealt with the reason why these people are leaving? Okay? They don't deal with it. Why is that? When you start asking those questions, then you get at the root of the problem. But most people don't ask those questions. They just go ahead and like, oh, all of a sudden these people want to move. Do you think that for years and years and years, people just sat and were their number one desire was to move to Europe? Do you think millions of people in Syria were just sitting there like, oh, I just wish I could move to Europe. I just wish I could move to Europe. I just wish I could move to Europe. And then when the opportunity arose, they're willing to, risk their lives to do so? No way. Those people were, 10 years ago, those people were living in a nice, fairly prosperous society. And then they became the focus of geopolitical politics, the big risk game of the superpowers, where you had America versus Russia, Saudi Arabia in there, Qatar, all those kind of countries. By the way, how many of those refugees are running south and trying to go to Saudi Arabia or Oman or those kinds of countries? Don't see that many doing that. Why is that, you wonder? Because they don't take them. This has been I see these charts on Facebook, and they show the countries that take the most. They'll show a group of countries and which countries are taking the large number of refugees. And they only list European nations. They don't list other nations. Why not? I mean, I'm not defending or criticizing the immigration policies or whatever of Europe. All I'm saying is ask the question. What's going on here? And why is it that the newspapers are not dealing with the idea that these countries such as Libya, highest per capita income in all of Africa until England, France, and the United States decided to bomb it into the Stone Age. Syria, Yemen. Why is it now these countries are torn up? Well, who tore them up? Come on, ask the question, newspapers. But see, in our society, we don't have that. We have the conformity. Oh, you turn the news on. isn't this awful what's going on here, there, and here, and here, and here? When it comes to environmental policy, immigration, economics, military, foreign aid, policies in regards to Russia, in regards to China, and so forth. Everyone just like, okay, that's interesting. And you're quoting what the newscaster is quoting off the teleprompter, which the words on that teleprompter were written by someone you'll never know. And of course, the paychecks come from people that are in the background that, again, you hear about their company names, but if you're told who, that they own the news, you're like, whoa, I didn't know they did the news too. I got that the other day. I mentioned that about several the mainstream media networks, and they're like, what? They're owned by who? Yep, look it up. Now, the thing is, I personally believe that you will have better psychological well-being of people if they're allowed to be more creative, allowed to live their lives as they wish, and they don't conform. I think that is the answer to a lot of our problems. Look at America today. How many Americans take some sort of prescription drug in reference to basically their psychology? Why? Is the only reason why Americans use so much is because other countries can't afford it? Well, Europe doesn't use as much, and they have the money to afford these things. That's something we need to ask. And why is it our school system seems not to be doing as well as it used to? Think about it for a minute. What was school like 40 years ago as opposed to today? We are more, even after the 1970s and so forth, when people tried to reform education with the ideas of Piaget, and you had ideas that were associated with Montessori schools and those kinds of things. Even though the teaching schools were coming out with this kind of, wow, we need to do this, we wound up with more conformity. To the point that now, look how many kids are on some sort of ADHD medication. Okay, think about that. And again, ask why. Don't just accept it like, well, yeah, I saw on this daytime talk show where they were talking about this. You're going, that's going back to the TV to find out your information when the TV itself is biased. Think about that for a minute when it comes to TV. The big networks make their money off selling you items, and they do so by using psychology to manipulate you to buy those items instead of buying the items that are being sold on the other network. So if essentially commercials, which we all recognize are manipulation, if you go a little further, you recognize that product placement's a form of manipulation. It's a commercial disguised within your favorite TV show, for instance. Then think about the fact that why does that manipulation stop when the news starts? Okay, why? Why would it stop then? If this is the mindset of the corporation itself, why do you think it would be any different somewhere else? Okay? I think the whole system is set up on manipulation, including most of your news programs. And I'm not saying you gotta shut yourself off. I'm not saying you can't even watch the stuff. If you want to watch I'm not going to mention any networks, but if you want to watch them, you can get information. But I like something Noam Chomsky once wrote, and he said that, if you want to really be informed, you've got to compare. You can't just take it from one news source and believe that. Compare it with another news source, one that is totally diametrically opposed to that particular viewpoint. And then you might get some news there. But now, the thing with conformity, I would say we can have better social cohesion if we allow more freedom of thought. That one of the reasons maybe why we're becoming a fragmented society is because we've gone too far. We've really gone too far in pushing it. And again, back to Freud. Freud actually did say that if you have to repress what he called the pleasure principle. Okay, you've got to repress that because you can't just be doing everything you want to be doing. You can imagine Bill Clinton if, you just told him you can do whatever you please. Or any other number of politicians. Or movie stars. Or, singers or something like that. You can imagine what MTV would look like if all of a sudden they just said, we're not going to censor anything. You performers can do whatever you please on stage. The thing is, though, ultimately society, does exercise a certain amount of control, and it's okay. But the thing is, Freud noted that too much repression will equal neurosis because you can't just, the more you push down, the more pressure builds up in the subconscious, and it'll come out in other areas. Okay? A sexually repressed person might become a very nasty, mean individual. A person that decides, I'm going to become a vegan, may lash out violently if they've gone, if they're really trying to repress their own desire to eat a hamburger, they'll become very nasty towards people they see eating a hamburger. Okay? So, you need to find a balance. Now, I do like one thing Freud said here, though. I mean, a lot of things there, but one thing, most people do not really want freedom because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. So, part of responsibility that most people just, they're afraid of the freedom is to just put the responsibility onto the culture and let the culture decide how they live, how they act, how they think. All right? Freedom with responsibility would be, respecting cultural norms to a degree. I mean, it's going to look kind of funny if you're riding your bicycle on a hot day naked down the bike path. Even if it's legal, people are going to, probably think that you're kind of weird, okay? But the thing is that with a certain level of responsibility, you'll have respect for other people, but also respect yourself enough that you can live your life without worrying what other people do. Not feeling, a lot of middle class church going Christian women in America have a problem, and that's the whole perfection concept. They think their houses have to be perfect. Like, maybe there's a TV show that shows their favorite minister at his house, showing the inside of the house, and everything's so perfect. Not noting that TV minister probably has a huge staff of maids and, so forth, and nannies for the kids who take care of everything, and everything's spotless. It's like comparing yourself in the old days, your lawn's all messed up. It's big. You haven't had a chance to cut the grass, but you look over at the king's palace, and his grass is cut right, and he's got flowers out and everything, but you're not realizing he's got 200 people on his staff whose job it is to make the gardens look perfect and the grass look perfect and everything just look perfect. Okay? But many people just become very neurotic, that they can't keep up. They can't look as good. They don't look as young as maybe an actress on TV who's their same age. They find out some actress is still, running around the beach in a thong bikini who's 45 years old, but she looks 25. Okay? But you don't know what kind of Photoshop went in, even if it wasn't Photoshop. Maybe, she spends 2 hours a day working out. That could make a difference. But still, they judge themselves according to that. At the same time, a lot of men judge themselves on how much money people make around them. I think that's one of the reasons why, for the most part, American men usually hang around people, not just occupation, but they hang around people that make about the same level of income as they do. Because then, you don't want to hang out with someone that, is flying to Morocco all the time whenever it rains outside and they just want to be warm. So anyway, the thing is, with an idea that centers on thinking for yourself, sit back and think about what makes you happy. And then incorporate that within the framework of the society in which you choose to live. And ultimately, we do choose. We can choose to live whether in an urban area where there's going to be a certain norms and so forth, suburban, rural, whatever. But within that framework too, there's various subcultures. And so you've got to find what makes you happy. If you're a person who happens to be you're making a 6-figure income, and everyone around you at work is like, hey, we're going to go to the opera or the symphony or something like that, and you happen to want to go to a rodeo, do it. Live life the way you really want to do. You want to get a tattoo? Do it. You don't want to get a tattoo? Do it. You don't want to wear makeup? Skip it. You don't want to shave your legs? Who cares? Okay? It doesn't make you it doesn't make you a feminist if you don't. And even if you want, what's wrong? We have one definition of feminist when there's a wide spectrum of feminism. I happen to believe women should be able to do what they please. Okay? And they should get paid the same amount of money for doing the work. Now, I guess I'm a feminist, but then there's probably some feminists that would think that my attitudes, for instance, maybe on abortion would automatically say that I'm not. Well, I would disagree with them.